excepcional, un momento clave en los cursos de verano, que es la participación del profesor Jean-Pierre Sauvage, en nombre del rector, el profesor.
Que suba el micro.
Se escucha mucho ruido aquí en el ordenador también.
Sí, Miguel Ángel, hay un ruido de fondo bastante molesto. No sé si los chicos podéis potenciar algo.
Miguel Ángel, ¿nos escuchas?
Sí.
Ah, vale. Se oye, es el micro, tiene un ruido muy fuerte de fondo.
No puedo deciros nada. Se acaban de cambiar el cable al micro.
A ratos se va y... Debe ser un contacto, porque a ratos se oye perfecto.
Buenos días. ¿Se oye mejor?
No, es
No.
un zumbido de fondo.
Ya.
Pero que se va y viene, o sea que debe ser contacto de algo.
Yo estoy con un inalámbrico, Ana.
Pues se oye exactamente igual, a lo mejor es lo que está pinchado el ordenador.
Está José Víctor por ahí, a ver si le puede echar un ojo.
A nosotros nos oís bien, sin zumbido ni nada.
No, se oye un zumbido, se oye un zumbido.
Ahora está quitando.
La canción de Stoddart, la caja de compuestos que está demasiada la señal. De la señal ya no es decisión mía, es decisión de ellos. A mí no me está llegando aún. A mí no me ha llegado aún, tampoco. No me han llegado, has enchufado a varios sitios. Ahí has llegado.
de la Universidad Complutense, que se celebra en San Lorenzo del Escorial. Estamos en un momento para mí muy importante, que es la intervención del profesor Jean-Pierre Sauvage, Premio Nobel de Química. Bonjour, Jean-Pierre. Good morning, Professor Sauvage.
Good morning.
Welcome to the summer process of the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. On behalf of the Professor, the Rector, Joaquín Goyese, it's a pleasure to introduce you to Professor Nazario Martín León, who is also a good friend. Thank you, Nazario, for coming here. He's the director of the course Multidisciplinary Nanoscience Advanced 2D Materials, from interlocking rings to molecular machines. And well, Professor Nazario Martín León is one of the most important professors in the Universidad Complutense. He is full professor of organic chemistry in our university. He's National Research Prize, and also he is Regional from the Autonomous Region of Madrid Research Prize. So it's an honor for us to be with Professor Nazario Martín León, who is going to introduce to Professor Jean-Pierre Sauvage. Thank you, Nazario, for coming.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me, Jean-Pierre?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
It's okay, it's acceptable. It's not great, but it's acceptable. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, please, our apologies for this technical problem, which is always inherent to be just in direct. So what I would like to do is just to introduce to Professor Jean-Pierre Sauvage is always quite simple, particularly for me, because I know him for many years ago, and I would like to, instead of just starting saying about the academic career and scientific career of Professor Sauvage, you can find all the information in the internet. And instead of that, I would like, because in the case of in the audience there are some people who are not very much engaged with science. So that is because I would rather prefer just in a few slides, 7 slides or so, I would like to say the why the Nobel Prize that received by Professor Sauvage is important. In order to say to a general audience of attendant people today. So I will go, Professor Sauvage will give you the lecture in English, as is the normal for scientists, but let me go back to the switch to the Spanish language just for 5 minutes, which that would be my presentation, just to say, to try to translate into the normal language the relevance of the contribution of Professor Sauvage to science. Okay, so okay, this is not the first slide. Should be 2 back. So Jean-Pierre, I apologize for, because I go to Spanish just for 5 minutes.
No problem.
Okay.
No problem at all.
Okay, but believe me that all this time will be engaged with your contribution, important contribution to science. So, como pueden ver todos ustedes, este es en 2016 el Premio Nobel de Química recayó en estos 3 grandísimos científicos, Ben, como le llamamos todos, Feringa, con quien, bueno, estuve hace exactamente 10 días en la Premio, profesor Fraser Stoddart de la Universidad de Northwestern y Jean-Pierre Sauvage de la Universidad de Estrasburgo, universidad que es la meca de Europa en términos de química supramolecular. Actualmente hay 4 premios Nobel en esta universidad. La primera pregunta, bueno, ellos recibieron, podemos ir para atrás por favor, ellos recibieron el premio Nobel, aquí está dicho, por el diseño y síntesis de máquinas moleculares. Entonces la primera pregunta puede ser, ¿por qué hacer máquinas moleculares? Bueno, el ejemplo, como tantas veces en ciencia, viene de la madre naturaleza, y es porque se puede decir que nuestros cuerpos, en general todos los seres vivos, pues somos un ensamblaje complejo de máquinas moleculares que intervienen en muchas funciones. Aquí hay un ejemplo de una máquina molecular biológica que es la ATP sintasa. Esta máquina molecular lo que hace es que genera ATP a partir de ADP y el intercambio de energía lo hace mediante el cruce de protones a través de la membrana en un lado y en otro. Esto funciona como una máquina molecular, como un rotor, más exactamente como un estator. Es cuando gira un paso y queda bloqueado y no puede ir para atrás, y viceversa. Esto es un ejemplo de máquina molecular biológica. Entonces, lo que han hecho nuestros premios Nobel, entre los que está el profesor Sauvage, es hacer máquinas moleculares de diseño. Entonces, hay algo importante que tenemos que ver, y es que cuando estamos pensando en una máquina molecular, en una máquina ordinaria, pues pensamos en una bicicleta, pensamos en un motor. La idea es que lo que hacemos en el mundo macroscópico es que nosotros producimos una energía, por ejemplo, con esta... Aquí se puede ver cómo una persona empuja un cuerpo y este cuerpo le pasa a una situación distinta. Pero la realidad es que cuando pasamos al mundo de la nanoescala, cuando pasamos a la máquina molecular, pues ya no podemos poner gasolina ni podemos conectarlo a un enchufe eléctrico. Entonces, ¿por qué se mueven las moléculas? ¿Cómo se hace una máquina molecular? Pues hay que ir al mundo nanoscópico y ahí veremos cómo el movimiento browniano, al azar que sucede, ha sucedido, y entonces lo que hacemos es que aprovechamos este movimiento y sujetamos, más que producir, como vemos, algo, lo que hacemos es que lo controlamos. ¿De acuerdo? Este es el concepto básico que deben de tener en cuenta ahora para entender la charla. El paso siguiente es que, bueno, ¿cuál ha sido la contribución del profesor Jean-Pierre Sauvage? Pues aquí se puede ver que esta es realmente la formación de un catenano. Catenano son dos anillos que en forma de cadena. Y la contribución seminal a la ciencia y la razón del premio Nobel es porque fue el primero realmente que hizo este tipo de estructuras de catenanos de una manera organizada, utilizando un template, utilizando una plantilla la plantilla en este caso fue un átomo de cobre, unir estas piezas y formar finalmente una estructura que, si eliminamos el átomo de cobre, terminan las dos unidas. Esto es muy relevante porque cuando se estudia en bachiller os han explicado que existe enlace covalente y enlace iónico y luego enlaces intermedios entre ellos dos, pero este es un tipo de enlace nuevo, que es el enlace mecánico. Este enlace no existía hasta que no se llegan a este tipo de sistemas. Para separar esos dos anillos tengo que romper enlaces. Es el enlace mecánico, ¿de acuerdo? Del que ya se conocía algo, pero que realmente se empiezan a utilizar estos compuestos cuando Sauvage hace este tipo de moléculas. Desde entonces la imaginación ha sido lo que ha gobernado la química del profesor Sauvage, y este tipo de estructuras más complejas, un catenano, un doble catenano, los knots, que los traducimos como nudos, pues son moléculas que se han ido haciendo, muy relevantes. El paso siguiente es que, bueno, esta es una foto que Jean-Pierre, y disculpadme que le llame así, pero nos conocemos ya hace muchos años y es un profesor al que no solamente admiro, sino que tengo muchísimo cariño y por tanto siempre nos llamamos así. Aquí hay algunas fotografías para él entrañables. Aquí podemos ver a un profesor Sauvage, muy joven, Dietrich Bucherer, al que alude mucho una persona que falleció, Christine, que está aquí señalada, y que falleció tristemente hace bastantes años, pero fijaos, estos fueron los dos trabajos seminales publicados en Tetrahedral Letters y en Jazz en los años 83 y 84, en donde él da a conocer este tipo de formación de estructuras químicas completamente novedosas. Y aquí podemos ver una fotografía muy curiosa. Esto sucedió, este es de un articulito que ahora comentaré, del año 2010. Esto fue cuando se celebró el 65 cumpleaños de Jean-Pierre en Estrasburgo. Entonces se hizo una sesión científica extraordinaria, de la que yo tuve el honor de ser encargado de luego hacer una especie de report de cómo había sido esa reunión científica. Pero esta fotografía es extraordinaria porque uno de los que intervinieron fue el profesor Jean-Marie Lehn, Premio Nobel de Química en el año 87 sobre química supramolecular, y en esta foto se ve a un joven Jean-Pierre Sauvage que está trabajando en su tesis en el laboratorio de Jean-Marie Lehn. Es uno de esos casos curiosos en donde si tienes un profesor que te dirige la tesis que ha sido premio Nobel, las probabilidades de que tú también lo seas yo creo que crecen. Entonces esta es una fotografía muy bonita en donde se ve a Jean-Pierre Sauvage, que probablemente no imaginó en ese momento pues que se llegaría a ser premio Nobel. De hecho, cuando es a la única persona, y he conocido a muchos premios Nobel, pero es a la única que he escuchado decir pues que no se explica cómo ha sido premio Nobel, ¿no? Porque le adornan muchas virtudes y una de ellas, desde luego, es la modestia. Pasamos ya a la siguiente, y yo creo que ya queda muy poquito, pero sí conocer esta... Bueno, este fue el artículo, lo digo porque aquí podéis ver cosas sobre Jean-Pierre Sauvage. Me encargaron que escribiese el report de la conferencia y se me ocurrió titularlo Jean-Pierre Sauvage, The Lord of the Rings. Y me llamó el editor para decirme que había sido el artículo más bajado en todo el mes en la revista. 10 años después, se celebra el 75 cumpleaños de Jean-Pierre, de nuevo en Estrasburgo. ¿Y qué había pasado entre medias? Había recibido el premio Nobel. Entonces fue un momento realmente emocionante, y una vez terminada esa reunión, de la que seguramente pues él contará cosas hoy, pues me encargaron de nuevo, con insistencia, en escribir de nuevo el report, y volví a escribir un report completamente distinto, pero que, ¿cómo se tituló? Pues Jean-Pierre Sauvage, The Lord of the Rings 2, ¿vale? Y con esto ya anuncio que estaré dispuesto a escribir, Jean-Pierre, estaré dispuesto a escribir, I will be ready just for preparing my third report. It should be, this is 2010, 2020, so we will meet in 2030 for your third report on your birthday celebration. Estos años son un año después, unos meses después de él. Muy bien, de su cumpleaños. Yo creo que queda una fotografía, muy impresionante. Bueno, esta, tengo que decir, es una fotografía muy curiosa, del año 2001, en una reunión en Valencia que organiza Abelino Corma, y pongo esta fotografía porque no es frecuente que en el año 2001 ellos reciben el premio Nobel en 2016. 15 años antes de recibirlo, se ve a un Jean-Pierre Sauvage que se lo pasaba muy bien cuando venía a España, está Ben Feringa y está Fraser Stoddart, los 3 premios Nobel en Química de 2016. Pero ojo, estaba también Balzani. Balzani ha sido muy importante, estaba también Horn, como extranjeros, y luego pues había un grupo de gente española pues muy relevante. La última transparencia que quiero mostrar es un día de los más importantes en la vida de Jean-Pierre, cuando reciben el premio Nobel, estas 3 personas que habéis visto en la fotografía anterior. Y para terminar, pues cuando lo reciben ya uno a uno, la última diapositiva, pues se ve a Jean-Pierre en todo su esplendor, porque se le ve una persona con mucho orgullo de recibir este premio, pero a la vez una persona tremendamente modesta, humana, de los científicos que son un ejemplo, no solamente por la ciencia que han hecho, sino por la humanidad que han transmitido al mundo de la ciencia. Yo creo que no hay nadie en el ámbito científico que no le considere una persona excepcional. Por tanto, ya no hay más diapositivas, pero si aprietas el botón, Miguel Ángel, pues agradecerle desde aquí. Thank you, Jean-Pierre. Thank you for many reasons. First of all, for your contribution to science, which many people, all of us have enjoyed very much indeed, and also for being one of the great models in science for the next generations. Thank you very much, and now the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
So do you see my screen?
Not yet, Jean-Pierre.
Normally you should see my screen now.
Okay, now.
You see it?
Yes.
Good.
Professor Sauvage, could you amplify the image of your slides?
Do you see my screen? This is the first slide. No.
Yes, it's okay now. Thank you.
Now we're ready.
Okay.
Now we're ready. Thank you.
Do you hear me?
I hear you. I think in the room they're hearing you.
You sure?
No. Okay, okay.
Okay, very good. So Nazario, thank you for the nice words. My daughter-in-law is from Colombia. And so I learned a bit of Spanish and I could understand some parts of what she said. So thank you for inviting me. Do you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Yes, please go ahead.
Jean-Pierre, please go ahead. Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay, so people can hear you pretty well in the room. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So I just wanted to say hello, to all the people. Buenos días a todos. And thank you for the invitation. When I see many people moving, I can guess there is a problem. No?
Yes. Please.
Jean-Pierre?
Yes?
Okay. Sorry for people moving, just to give some news on the performance. But everything is ready, so please go ahead with your lecture.
Okay.
People can hear you very well. So the floor is yours.
So Nazario, I'm now going to thank you again for the third time. But I think you deserve it. So we know each other for many years, so I can speak very freely. And so this is the title of my lecture, and I will start with the very beginning. At the very beginning, as Nazario mentioned, this is catenanes and protaxanes. So catenanes have been discussed for many, many years. When I say discussed, it means that they have not been made. So there were lots of discussion for decades and decades and decades. And the chemists were fascinated by these hypothetical systems. but very little was done in terms of practical preparation of Ketones. So this is what is highlighted here. The synthesis of these compounds seems to be very, very easy. Rotaxanes are similar to Ketones, except that instead of having 2 rings, you have only 1 ring here, and an axis threaded through the ring, and 2 big stoppers. Now, something very important happened in 1964. So let's go back in time. 1964, this is the year when the first fully convincing synthesis of a ketone was published by 2 German chemists, great chemists, Schill, Gottfried Schill, and his boss of the time, Arthur Westinghouse. And the work was done in Freiburg, which is very close to Strasbourg, maybe 70 kilometers south-east. And I think when the paper was published in '64, everybody was very enthusiastic. I was too young, actually. I was 20 or so, not a chemist as yet. And so they published a synthesis, which was very, very difficult, 23 individual steps. And although it was beautiful in terms of intellectual and practical achievement, the people were kind of discouraged because it seemed to be so difficult to repeat that nobody repeated it, and the field basically disappeared. And so, for 20 years, very little happened. And now I will tell you how we enter the field, and you will see that there is a good part of luck. You have to be lucky in science. So after I did my postdoc in Oxford, in the UK, in inorganic and organometallic chemistry, I came back to Strasbourg and to work with Jean-Marie Lane, my former boss. And when I became associate professor also, we started together a big project on trying to split the water molecule to H2 and O2. And I say it's a grand project because at the time, many groups were trying to split the water molecule using solar energy, and it is still true today. It shows that it's a very difficult problem, and still there are groups today which try to split the water molecule using light energy. But we published something which seemed to be of interest because we could make dark hydrogen from water and light and an organic electron donor. And so that was, in a way, what allowed me to be promoted and to start my own research team. Just to, I think we can skip that. But I should say that at the time, there was a hero, and the hero was ruthenium -2. This is this complex. I'm not sure that you have seen it so often, but you have a ruthenium atom at the center, and you have 3 bidentate ligands. This is the way they are called, because they have 2, let's say, 2 biting atoms, 2 nitrogen atoms each, and you obtain an octahedral complex. And this molecule has all the properties, the ideal properties for leading to water split. It was not so simple, but this complex has been used since, let's say, the mid-80s or so, and it is still very much used today. It seems to be the ideal complex for doing electron transfer from the excited state. There is a problem. Ruthenium is a noble metal. If you remember the classification of the elements, ruthenium is just below iron. It's a noble metal, similar to platinum, gold, palladium, rhodium, and thus extremely expensive and very rare. And so when I started my group after some time, we had a project which was trying to replace ruthenium for another metal, a cheaper metal, such as copper. And as you know, copper is at least 10,000 times less expensive than ruthenium, and so it seemed to be a realistic project. Another time, there was already some work which had been done by Dave McMillan, an American photochemist or photophysicist whom I knew, and he knew me because of some publications which seemed to be of interest to him, and his publications of interest to me. And Dave McMillan decided to do his sabbatical leave in Strasbourg. That was a great idea. And so he arrived in Strasbourg at the beginning of the 80s, and very rapidly he had discussions with the people in Maribou and me, of course. And at the time, we, when I say we, means Christian Duchequer, my good friend, we had made this molecule, which is non-phenol phenanthroline. This is a very classical molecule, 1,10-phenanthroline, and we could attach 2-phenanthroline. Not a great deal in terms of synthesis, but the molecule was new, so finding. And so when Dave McMillan saw the molecule, he became very excited, and he told us, well, we should collaborate. You will make the copper complexes with this ligand, and we will do all the photophysics and all the photochemical studies. And okay, we embarked on this project. It was very simple. In 5 minutes from this and copper 1, we obtained pure this molecule. It said, we call it the entwined system, because we have 2 ligands which are entwined with one another around copper. Very simple. And they found very exciting photochemical properties. They even did water splitting experiments and all that. So it was a very nice company. But there was something else. At the time, I was in charge of drawing the molecules. Christian and some other people were making the molecules, and I was drawing them. I should say the easy part. And if you draw your molecule, because much before Chemical, if you draw your molecule, I think you digest their shape, their structure, much better than if you go to your laptop and go chemical drawing of the molecule. Another time, we could realize easily that if you materialize the 2 ends of this ligand by 2 blue dots, and separately materialize the 2 other ends by red dots of this other ligand. Now, once you have done that, you will interlink the 2 blue dots, and separately you will interconnect the 2 reds. Look, what have you done? I'm sure most of you saw what we obtained on paper, of course. We made a ring here. We made another ring here containing the blue fiber, and those rings are interlocked forever. We made a catenane in principle. And so we had to discuss with my group, are we going to continue and do CO2 activation, water splitting, inorganic chemistry, or should we join in another field, which was kind of virgin, trying to make catenanes properly? And we decided. Within a couple of months, Christian Duchequer, who was a fantastic organic chemist, slightly even more experienced than I. She was a CNS researcher, and she had decided to join my group. So we knew each other very well. And within a couple of months, as I said, she had the first paper on the synthesis of the ketone. So this is in French, une nouvelle famille de molécules, les métallocaténanes. I'm not going to insult you and translate it to English. It goes without even saying. And so we could demonstrate in a short paper, letters, that catenanes are accessible molecules. Every synthetic group which wants to make catenanes can now make them relatively easily. You invest a couple of weeks to learn the techniques, and within a couple of weeks you can make 1 gram, 2 grams of the catenanes. And so that was a good start. Now, just for you to perhaps understand better the strategy, we will start from this compound here, which has been functionalized, so the phenanthroid is functionalized. It is obtained in 2 steps from phenanthroid. You can make it at the 10 gram or 20 gram scale if you want. And now you will react it with copper. So it's copper 1. Copper 1 is here, and you do what we did, what I explained. The entwined structure, and now it is sufficient to cyclize on the right and on the left. It's a one-part reaction. Everything is a one-part reaction. You mix with copper, and then you cyclize, and you obtain the 3 steps. The other strategy is a little bit more complex, but again, it is reasonably easy compared to the old strategies of Sheen or others. You will make a ring, and the ring will cost you maybe 3 or 4 steps. And after that, you will proceed to the complexation, threading, and cyclization. So we had 2 strategies. So it was, as I said, the beginning of the field, and the scene changed completely. And I think that within a couple of years, the vision of the chemists on catenanes or hydroxanes changed dramatically. So we could crystallize those species. If we want, we can demethylate using potassium cyanide. We obtain the metal-free species, and we can remethylate using copper. Both steps are quantitative, instantaneous, and we were lucky enough to be able to crystallize the compound and to obtain X-ray structure. So you can see here that the structure of the copper containing system is very compact, kind of globular, and the other structure, on the other way, is very open. And one ring can glide more or less free within the other one. So we are not as yet making molecular machines, but we noticed that there is a complete metamorphosis, big change of the structure by using either potassium cyanide or copper. Now, let me pay homage to the people who are really the pioneers of the field of catenanes. Wasserman wrote a very nice review article in JAS many years ago. It was purely a discussion, no experimental work. Sheen and Wittinghouse, I already mentioned their contribution. Our team arrived in 1983, the very first paper, and then we had to wait for some time for the people to join the catenane club, so to say. Fraser Stoddart, it took them 6 years, and some others. And so we have no time to discuss all the other contributions, but you should know that today there are many, many groups, probably hundreds of groups, working on catenanes, hydroxanes, or knotted molecules, or molecular machines. It's a very active field. To tell you the truth, we were not so excited about molecular machines from the beginning. We were very happy to have a good system for making catenanes, even more complex catenanes. We went up to 7 catenanes with a huge central ring and 6 smaller rings interlocked with the central ring. And so we were interested in topology, molecular topology, because those species have interesting, exciting topological properties. And so we made the Fraser at the very end of the 80s, and then later on till the year 2000 or so. And more complex topologies, such as the Solomon link. And so we had fun really making those. And so something which probably escaped to many people at the time is that Ketones and NADs are very, very common in biology. And so that was kind of an excuse for us, telling the people, look, in biology, in evolution, DNA, proteins, and viruses are also nothing of catenated. And I will just show you a few examples, but beautiful examples. Of course, we are not at the nanometer scale. We are now at the micron scale, or even beyond the micron scale. But you have DNA here, circular duplex DNA, which has been melted, so you have the tetramer. And it's a biological process. Men have nothing to do with that. It's a biological process, and there are many, many other examples of DNA forming Ketones. So this is a beautiful Ketonane here, which is famous because Whitehead was a mathematician, a topologist in the UK, and DNA can form the Whitehead link, 5 crossings for a catenane containing 2 interleukin. And proteins also, I think it is spectacular, that proteins form NADs. And it has been studied in detail. If you go to Cambridge databank of structures of biological molecules, as you know, there are thousands and thousands of structures, and some people have searched, and they found that a bit more than 1% of the proteins are nothing larger than. And it is remarkable. I think nobody would have bet a single dollar on that before the people explored this big data. And probably the record in terms of beauty and complexity is that of the virus. It's not a nasty virus. It's not, it is totally innocent to mammals and to human beings. It invades bacteria, like many other viruses. It is named HK97, and the structure was published in 2000 in Science, and you have this structure. So if you look at it, at first glance, it has nothing special. It's a truncated icosahedron. Truncated icosahedron, like many other viruses. The size is also normal, 60 nanometers in size. But if you look more carefully at the membrane or the envelope of it, you will find something which is amazing. It's a huge catenane. You look at that and you can recognize cyclic arrays of proteins. The pentagon here, hexagon, 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 pentagon, etc. And so, in English, you would qualify it as a chain mail. In French, we say côte de maille, probably something similar in Spanish. But this is côte de maille, or a chain mail. And of course, it is very strong, very resistant. And so the virus can distort easily. But basically, it will never break because of the cyclic links, which maintain the structure. So it can pass barrier, invade bacteria, but basically, it will never break. Mechanically, very, very strong. Now let's move on towards molecular. So, some 2 important statements. If you look at the millions of molecules made by mankind, made by chemists, or other people in medicine, pharmacy, whatever. These molecules are, most of them, they are considered as static, or at least if they move, we have no control over their motion. So we say that they are static, which is kind of abuse of language, because they move, let's say, based on stochastic motion or random motion. Now, let's take the other family of molecules, which are also everywhere and very, very numerous, biological molecules. And for several families of biological molecules, motion is absolutely essential. And in particular, motor proteins, they move in a strictly controlled fashion, such as rotary motors. I believe that Nazario has already mentioned ATP-8 or ATP synthase, linear motors, waters, systems which can contract or elongate, and probably the record in terms of complexity is the ribosome, which is the most complex molecular machine ever made in evolution by biologists. Two examples, ATP synthase and kinesis. ATP synthase is called ATP synthase when it is in charge of making ATP. You know that ATP is the fuel of life. There is nothing which is alive on the planet which is not based on ATP. The most primitive organisms, to mammals, everybody uses ATP-8 and ATP. So ATP synthase to make ATP from ADP and inorganic phosphate, the two degradation products, or ATP-8 when you want to hydrolyze ATP, in other words, to burn your fuel, although it's not burning, it is hydrolyzing or degrading. And this is a rotary motor. It is embedded in bilayer membranes, and those bilayer membranes are part of the mitochondria in the cell. The mitochondria are kind of the energy factories, and this ATP synthase can turn very rapidly. But it can turn even more rapidly when it hydrolyzes ATP to ADP, and especially if you have an artificial system for which you add a very high concentration of ATP. It can rotate at a rate or speed similar to that of the engine of a few Formula 1 cars. And so, very simple, you have the ADP and inorganic phosphate which arrive here. They insert themselves in between those proteins. So you have the 6 big proteins, and there are some small spaces, voids here. They insert themselves and they are compressed, and this leads to the formation of ATP. Beautiful. And another example, which maybe some of you have already seen, it's a very popular video which you can find on the web. It comes from Harvard in the UK, in the US. This is the kinesin. The kinesin has a function which is to carry molecules in the cell from one place to another. In the cell, you know that you have biosynthetic factories which can make molecules, hormones, fragments of ATP, fragments of DNA, fragments of RNA, small pieces of proteins and bigger proteins. And those factories in the cell are kind of fixed. They don't move so much. And so the molecules which have been prepared from these factories have to be distributed. It's exactly like the factory of shoes, let's say, in the country. The shoes will have to be dispatched somewhere and sold out. And this is exactly the same here. So the kinesin, which is here, attached at its back to a huge bag, and in this huge bag, you have all the molecules which have to be carried from one place to another. And the kinesin is a walker. It's amazing, but it walks here. Each step is a few nanometers long, and it walks very fast. In fact, we should say it's running very, very fast. It's easier to look at it as if it was working, walking still. So now let's go back to chemistry, and let's ask ourselves, why are Ketones and protaxane so important in relation to molecular? The answer is very clear. If you have Ketones and protaxanes, mostly if you can name them, if you are about to synthesize them, by using some tricks, perhaps you will be able to set the system in motion. So the ring can move here from the part of the right to the left, so back to the right, and this is very similar to a piston moving in the cylinder. In other words, it's a linear movement. Now, if you look at those two other systems, Ketonane or protaxane, this is probably a new way to rotary move. And thus, Ketonane and protaxane are ideally adapted to the making of molecular energy. And this is why, probably, it didn't take too long between the synthesis of these molecules and the synthesis of the first molecular energy. So let me show you the very first system we made in my book, in Frankfurt. It's a two-ketone. So a little bit of inorganic chemistry, or coordination chemistry. So you all know that copper has several oxidations. And the two main oxidation states are copper 1+, in which case you have a G10 electronic configuration metal, and copper 2+, which is a D9 condition metal, D9 electronic configuration. D10 is not really a condition metal, and D10 means that copper 1 will be very happy if it is surrounded by 4 nitrogen atoms arranged as a tetrahedron. This is why we made it. Now let's oxidize copper 1 to copper 2. We generate the copper 2 species, which is very, very unstable, because copper 2 is now a real transition metal, and it is not satisfied with the tetrahedral environment. It wants to be 5 coordinated or 6 coordinated. And this is why the system, which is here, the ring, which is here, will start to glide. The 3 nitrogen atoms, which were originally here during nothing, will gradually replace the 2 nitrogen atoms of the phenethylene, which was originally interacting with the copper center. And you obtain this new species with a very stable copper 2 complex. Very happy copper 2. Now you can go back, you generate a very unstable copper 1 complex, which will again rearrange, and you go back to the copper 1 state of the beginning. I have a video which is demonstrative, I hope. So now we start from copper 1, we abstract an electron, generate copper 2, rearranging the system, you have a stable state, you re-inject your electron, so you reform copper 1. And of course I can do it by computer basically forever, but this is also true with the molecule. It is totally stable. We have never seen any degradation. Now I would like to pay homage to Ben Feringa and his group. It's not only Ben Feringa, but we had a good, excellent and big group of people working on switches, photogluon switches, and they were the first to publish a line-driven rotary motor, real rotary. not something which can oscillate or pirouette, but something which will have directionality. It will rotate always in the same direction, clockwise or counterclockwise. So we start from a double bond. And for those who know some organic chemistry, they will probably remember that if you have a sterically hindered C-C double bond, when you shine light on it, preferably UV light, the system will photoisolate. So you go from this to that. And the system in this case will photoisolate, and you will obtain the second form of the mode. And after some time, if you are patient enough, you will realize that the system has continued this motion, and you still have rotation about this CC bond here. So you obtain the third form of the molecule. And once they obtain this form, the people in that Feringa group, so, well, let's continue. We will again irradiate this and see whether we can continue the motion. And they did. And the system continues to rotate. They obtain the fourth form, which can be thermally converted to the starting form. Beautiful example, a part of serendipity, and beautiful work. And so they published a video which might help you visualize the system. So we start from the double bond, which is here. And we have the two groups. It's a symmetrical system. The double bond, the skyhole, of course, it is essential. If you want to have a unique direction of motion, it will be skyhole. And now what we will do is remember that we have four processes. The photochemical element, the thermal element, the photochemical element, and the thermal element. So on the video, we will have four elements. The thermal process will be symbolized by this heating symbol. The photochemical events will be represented by a big flash of light. And let's start. So we start, big flash, thermal, big flash, and we go back to the starting point. Same again, thermal, big flash, thermal. And you can do that many, many times. At the beginning, of course, the system was very slow. I think it used to take them a couple of hours to go from one term. But nowadays, they improve the system in a spectacular fashion. They generalize the concept, which is the traditional strategy for research teams. And they are in the, probably below the microsecond. So in Stoddart, we try to improve the systems. The weak points were that we had no directionality, so impossible to pretend that we can make utterly good, but we had pirouetting systems, and of course, we have also kind of molecular shuttle systems, and so we improved the system dramatically. And I should say that during the years 2005, 2010, we were even below the microseconds for moving subsystems. So this is a pirouetting system, and it can move very, very fast by just modifying the structural parameters of the molecule we were working. Now, I also would like to mention the work of Fraser Stoddart. And Fraser Stoddart and his group, they were interested in molecular structure. So a system which can do that. The ring will start on the left, go to the right, go back to the left, etc. So this is very shuttle. And it's funny because they published their very first paper the same year as our pirouetting catenary, which is of course good news. Better be used rather than having a winner and a loser. And so the system is really nice. They start on a very strongly positively charged ring, what they call the blue bars. And the blue bars contain 4 positive charges. It's a very strong electron acceptor, electron division. Now it can interact with those donors, electron donors. The diamine, aromatic diamine, is a very strong electron donor, so it likes to interact with a strong electron acceptor. And in addition, they have a weak donor, relatively weak donor, the dark ether, just in case you destroy the attractive interaction between the blue ring and the green station. And you can do that by abstracting the electron from the green station and generating a radical cation. And if you generate a radical cation, of course, you have no attraction anymore, you have repulsion. You have a positive charge here, you have 4 positive charges here, so the ring will rapidly move to the right so as to interact with the red station, the aromatic. And you can go back. So that was a very nice system. Of course, totally different from our copper frequency, but based on similar principles, electron transfer with the perturbation, which will lead to a motion. They did some beautiful work, which I also would like to mention very, very briefly. If you take a very long potassium, and if you attach both ends to nano electrodes, you can make a system which will store information and process information by using electricity. So we have limited time, but just you still have the blue bugs here, and the blue bugs can interact with the green station or the red station. If it is still varying its 4 positive charges, it will interact with this species. In addition, if now you can find a signal which will be to oxidize this species. And if you oxidize it, the blue bugs will move and go to the red station. And as you do that, you can consider that you write something. You were at the 0 state and you will write 1. Now you can read by measuring the electronic conductivity of a bundle of such wires, if you like. And the conductivity will very much depend on whether the blue box is sitting here or sitting here. And so you can read the position of the blue box. And finally, when you want to erase and write again, you will apply a very high potential, and everybody will go back to the initial. So very nice. Now let me move on and discuss some systems we made in our group, which is a molecular muscle, artificial molecular muscle. I'm very conscious that this is kind of abuse of language, but let's say this is a molecular system which is reminiscent of muscles, because you can contract and elongate wide gliding filaments along one line. And this is the way muscles work. Just to remind you, I think the behavior of muscles, natural muscles, is understood for many, many years. If you look at a skeletal muscle, you have filaments, thin filaments, consisting of the polymer, active polymer, and the thick filaments, myosin. And those filaments can glide along one another, like my finger, if you can see that. And if you contract, of course, the 2 parts which are here and here, if you set this, will get closer and closer to one another. And if you want to relax and to elongate, stretch your muscles, of course, the system will operate in a totally different way. You will go back from here to So you contract here, you consume ATP, because contracting your muscles is tiring, you need energy, and relaxing is not tiring. You do not need to hydrolyze ATP to consume the fuel, and you will go back to the relaxed. So we made a molecule which was very difficult to make, so I would like to pay homage to the two people who did the work, Cello from Valencia and Christian. And the molecule was very complicated, but it was such a joy when we saw that it worked. So it's a dimer, protection dimer. You have a pale blue filament here, a dark blue filament here. And if we send a chemical signal to the molecule, it will contract down to 6 nanometers. And by sending another signal, it will go back to the 8 nanometers. It's a complex system, which at the beginning, I think, was not so promising in terms of potential applications. It was based on metal exchange, because copper likes to be, copper 1 likes to be 4 coordinated, as we have on the list. But if we replace copper from zinc to plus, zinc prefers to be 5 coordinated. And thus, this is the trick, very simple. We kick out copper 1, we introduce zinc, and the system now will contract because zinc will be 5 coordinated. If we do it the opposite way, we will negate. So this is probably the very first muscle based this principle that was reported 20 years ago. But the field has developed in a spectacular fashion, and many groups are now making muscles, nanomuscles, artificial muscles, based on much simpler systems. By changing the pH, for instance, you can easily elongate or contract, and particularly in Strasbourg, there is a good, very successful group which could prepare fibers that can be contracted or elongated by modifying the pH. They can be nano objects or micro objects. Let me finish up the scientific part and tell you that, of course, there were many molecular machines made by several groups, many groups, I can say today, and quite a few molecular machines made in our group. Probably the most complex was that of a molecular compressor, and the molecular compressor is based on this principle. We have here a 4-rotaxane, 2 bis macrocycles, one bis macrocycle, another bis macrocycle, and these cycles have been threaded by done net. So an axis and 2 big stoppers at the ends. And what we could show is that if we have a guest complex between those 2 green plates, the green plates are porphyrins. If we have something in between, if we send a signal to the molecule, the 2 plates will get close to one another, they will get closer and closer to one another. The guest will be compressed and finally expelled. And if you want to look at this piece of work in detail, we wrote a review article a couple of years ago. So let me finish up by saying that there were many teams which joined the field of molecular machines, either using Ketones or rotaxanes, or using totally different systems. So pure-working Ketones, molecular shuttles, rotary motors at the molecular level were the very first ones. And then there are other systems, muscles, compressor, molecular pumps, molecules able to walk on the rail, and this is the work of David Lee. probably one of the most creative groups in the world for the moment. They even tackled the problem, which seemed to be totally crazy, trying to mimic the ribosome. So they were indeed able to make a peptide consisting of 3 different amino acids, disposed in a perfectly controlled way, and many other examples which have been published and which are probably being made and studied at the moment. I give you this. Applications, I know that I have very often the question, what can we hope for the future? I should say that it's a very difficult question because, as you know, the future is very difficult to predict. But one can think of, let's say, potential applications in a relatively short range in catalysis, because catalysts are very often molecular machines, even all catalysts, and we can probably improve their efficiency. Artificial muscles, it goes without saying that it could be of interest. But probably, in my opinion, the most important one will be vectorization or targeting of therapeutic molecules in the body, so that the therapeutic molecule will find their target, cancer cells or viruses, and destroy the target without introducing too many damages in the body. And I believe it's a very active field of research for the moment, trying to transport and deliver therapeutic molecules where they are needed, close to the cancer cell. Let me finish up by telling you that, of course, this was a very collective piece of work. And the beauty of the French system is that if we adapt our organization, we can work as teams of friends, teams of permanent people. And I think our group is a good example of that. So the people whose names are in bold spent between 10 and 25 years in my group. They have a lot of responsibilities also, of course, otherwise it wouldn't be pleasant for them. So we were most of the time co-supervising PhD students, or even co-supervising postdocs, and everything worked really incredibly efficiently thanks to this organization. We also had fantastic PhD students. After a while, we could hire the top PhD students you can even dream about. And very good postdocs, so I would like to thank them. I would also like to thank these people for their contributions. So you see some names which are in bold here. They are Spanish postdocs, fantastic postdocs, probably the best people who worked in my group. Diego, Pablo Gavinia, Shadow, Jesus, Schultz, she's now in the US, and Feringa, and so I would like to thank them for their contributions. The work on the compressor I mentioned, the very complicated antaxane was done by these people who were also very efficient. And finally, let me thank my university, the CNRS, the European communities. They were very generous, which is, of course, essential. My new institute, which I joined after I had to retire from the CNRS, at the invitation of Jean-Pierre and his colleagues. I would also like to thank Northwestern University, where I spent 3 years after I had to retire from the CNRS. Thanks to Fraser Stoddart and his colleagues, and was really fantastic period. We had Fraser and Premio, which was Strasbourg and Fraser, Jean-Pierre, who is nowadays a very, very close friend. We didn't see each other so much for 30 years. We were seeing each other at some meetings, but we were not even in the same building. But nowadays we are very, very close in terms of geography. Our desks, offices are maybe 30 meters from one another, and we are very Malcolm Gray passed away 2 years ago, very sadly, but we with him. But I learned a lot of inorganic and organic chemistry. Some teachers also have a very strong influence on my family, and I would like to thank my two good friends, Stoddart and Feringa, just to tell you the truth. Fraser, Stoddart, we knew each other since 1979, and 27 or 28 years ago, we were very close friends, and we decided to exchange our children. And their youngest daughter, Alison, spent some time in our family to improve the French. That was not so good, but she had good time. And our son spent also a couple of weeks at the Stoddart family 27 years ago or so to improve the English because he imagine. A few final remarks, if I may. I just would like to pass a message. I know messages are very pretentious. I hate being pretentious. But just something for young people who are ambitious and who would like to start their own research. I think they have to keep in mind that novelty is number one in terms of importance. The second is probably encounter. Discussing with your friends, discussing with people you never met before, going to meetings, exchanging ideas. This is very, very important. And then the third very important thing, I believe, is to be ready to jump. Ready to jump meaning that if you have been working in inorganic photochemistry, let's say, or CO2 electrochemical activation, which was our case. But if you have been working in this field for 20 years, basically you know everything. And the chances that you will be very creative are decreased. And so do not hesitate, jump from a field to another when you can, when you think you have some good idea. Nobody is going to kill you if you fail, then you can go back to the original field in which you feel very comfortable. But I believe it is very important. Serendipity is also important. And on that, let me conclude. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre, for this inspiring and encouraging lecture, particularly for so beneficial, so useful for our young students. Thank you very much indeed. This is a beautiful example of how an idea is at the front of science. A relatively simple idea like this of creating these kind of things, then is, of course, is quite difficult to go in practice and get it in the right manner. Because in this case, your seminal contribution was just to use the copper as a template. Because before that, you mentioned Jean-Pierre to shield. He did it. He tried to do it in a way in which not was so exciting for the scientific community, because it lacks the essential of the copper atom. So sometimes one idea, which is an inspiration, it is at the front of science. This is an important one of your messages to our audience today. And it is also quite remarkable to see how these molecules that some years ago nobody talked about that, molecular machines. And then you realize that molecular machines are everywhere. And thank you for opening this new field of science, which is so interesting from many viewpoints. So this is your legacy to the science in general and to the chemists in particular. That is because we are so proud to have you here today. So if you don't mind, if any of young students, this is a great opportunity to talk to Jean-Pierre, to ask a question that you will remember all your life. So if you are interested in asking any question, regardless, never mind if it is just the topic he presented today or any other question related with science, or is open for discussion if you like to go ahead. Please. If in the meantime, if they want to think about, and they are thinking about, so please think about. And now you mentioned something which is important in the life of all scientists, even though some of them don't like, or we don't like to confess, which is serendipity. My question is a little bit, how can you, what rate of serendipity was in your life? I mean, as a scientist, how serendipity found you sometimes, or you found serendipity? How often? How could you? Because I appreciate, I learned this word, serendipia or serendipidad, we say in Spanish, many years ago. And I have to confess that it appears in my life more often than I would expect. I don't know in your case, but it could be interesting, because now it's not necessarily to go to science, because you can go to science to the original papers and so. If you have any question related with that, but this is another good opportunity for knowing a little bit more about someone like Jean-Pierre. So please, Jean-Pierre.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So serendipity, it is much more important than what the people believe. And in our case, I think the most important event was meeting David McNeil, the guy who was working on copper photochemistry. And the fact that he moved to Strasbourg for his sabbatical leave was incredibly important. I'm not sure we would have worked on copper without his contribution. And we published, a couple of papers together at the beginning, and then we moved towards Ketones. But it was extremely important. And I know, if I may say, that many other great discoveries have been done thanks to serendipity. And one that Feringa, Feringa is very large. And he made it clear on several occasions that in their photochemical rotary motor, the second step, they did the third photoisomerization, and then they had a mixture, which normally, if they had been working on it immediately, would not have shown that the motion continued. And the motion goes on. It went on overnight before the student came back, and then they realized, so we have a trick, for making the rotary motor. And so there are a couple of examples like that that are really spectacular.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm sure you will agree, I think we should not be ashamed, of finding things thanks to serendipity. I think we should be proud on the contrary. Because serendipity can be, very misleading. You can completely miss, the point, the important point.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, because actually I wouldn't say never ever that in your case the use of templating was serendipity at all, because it was based in your previous former studies, photochemical studies. So it was the idea in front of the science. So serendipity was, for instance, a field I know pretty well, which are fullerenes, for instance. That was serendipity, for instance. Not in your case, that for sure not. Because it was the origin of this concept was coming step by step for a long period of time. So it was a very good exercise of putting one idea in the front of science. So this is because it was so interesting. And eventually a new field created in science. That is the maximum aspiration of any scientist, to open a new scenario for science. And you got it. So that is wonderful for us. And, okay, so one question is over there. Please go ahead.
Hello, Jean-Pierre, very interesting conference. My question was, do you think those molecular machines can be integrated with a living tissue, or they will always be as a separate, as you said, vector for drugs or things like that? Thank you.
I don't know who you are, and I do not even see you. But you touched a critical point. Congratulations. I'm sure, yes, someday those molecular machines will be biocompatible. For the moment, it's still difficult. But to tell you the truth, make it true, I'm old and I decided not to continue my research anymore. But if I was to continue, if I had some opportunity to do research, that would be exactly what I would try to do with my group. To make molecular machines, to design, make them, study them, which are biocompatible, based on amino acids, sugars, or whatever. And I'm sure that using biological molecules, we have everything we need for making molecular machines which are relatively similar to those made using totally artificial products. So I'm fully agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. In this regard, bioelectronics, the so-called bioelectronics, is another emergent field in which, for sure, that the molecular machines can be also a part of it. So, beautiful example with proteins and electroactive or photoactive molecules have been published, for sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay. The last question. Any other people are waiting? Okay. 1 and 2. Sergio, you will be the last one. Okay. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the really nice talk. I have a physics background. I've been really interested in this. So
could you speak out, please? And I do not hear you too well.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for the really. Do you hear me now?
Excuse me. Why don't you come here? He can see you. Okay, and then you ask the question because now our young students asking you. So you can come here, please, over there. Thank you for the question. Don't be shy over there. You can say hello.
Hi. Well, I'm Isabel.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you for the really nice talk. I have a background in physics rather than chemistry, so it's been really interesting and different from what I do. I have a question which is about compatibility too, but in the field of memories. You have talked about these molecular machines that can develop a memory, two-state memory. Would you be able eventually to integrate this in a CMOS technology? With everything
It's a very important point. Very important point. I go back. Do you still see my screen?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
And I go back to, so this is, actually used it. So this is the work of a lot of people, Fraser, Stoddart, Jean-Pierre, and many people. And they had a big project which was trying to make electronic memory storage devices using molecules. Is it related to your question?
Yes, that was the question actually, yes.
And I think they had big contracts with Hewlett-Packard and many other companies, using silicon, of course, based on silicon semiconductors and transistors, chips. But for some reason, they stopped. And the reason was that their molecules were too unstable. Because if you want to have something which will store information, you should be able to read, erase, write again, millions of them. Otherwise, it's not going to be very useful. And their systems were very unstable. And I think everybody knows why. The molecules are very fragile, very fragile. And if you select molecules which can be extremely strong, I do not see why we shouldn't be able to make memory storage devices based on molecular systems.
Okay.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah, totally. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much. And the last question. And here. Please, go ahead.
Hello, yeah?
Hello? Yeah, I see you.
Okay, my question is a little bit more easy there. My name is Sergio Marcos Lopez. My question is a little bit more simple, maybe. I don't know.
I see the microphone, but I do not see the
I love this molecular motors thing, and I know just a little bit of the field. I would love to see some sample involving some carbon nanoforms. I don't know if they are
involving some what?
Involving nanocarbons, nanoforms, carbon nanoforms.
Well,
that's some examples.
Yeah, I would say that the question is that the two lectures before you, Jean-Pierre, have been related with carbon nanostructures and in general, and the question, the general question would be if these molecular machines you showed us, if some of them have been connected in some way with carbon nanostructures.
Or some other nanostructure or bigger structure.
Yeah, okay.
Because they are not biocompatible, basically.
No, they should be compatible. But I think nanotubes have been used for making molecular machines by moving two nanotube axes together, it seems to me. But as far as I know, the synthetic molecules or synthetic molecular machines of the time I just spoke about have never been connected to nanotubes. They haven't been connected to C60. For instance, the fluorines have been used as stoppers.
Yeah.
You see the point?
Yeah.
If you make potassium, you can stop, make the stopper a Westminster fluorine. But it's a good project.
Yeah, the fluorines were used as stoppers for the system, for the machine.
Bigger structures that have been attached to? Maybe some big proteins or membranes or something like that? There has no yet.
Well, what?
Not as far as I know.
No.
There is very little connection between carbon nanostructures and molecular machines for the moment.
Okay.
You will do it then. Try to do it.
You can do it, yeah, okay. Yeah, and so this is, okay, inspiration is there and the imagination is the only limit. So, but here there are many young people, so I hope that imagination is coming in big amounts with such a generation. So Jean-Pierre, it was our real pleasure. I will be, well, I personally like to thank you, but also in the name of the director of the courses, which is Miguel Ángel Casapeiro, my friend Miguel Ángel, and also in the name of our rector as well. So I would like just to say, to tell you goodbye, but I will give you the microphone just to say.
Thank you, Professor Sauvage. Just to say that next time I would like to meet you in person in San Lorenzo de Escorial. And of course you will be invited by the Universidad Complutense in Madrid, which is your home from now. So it will be a pleasure.
Jean-Pierre, only one question. Don't forget that in 2029, we have a meeting in Strasbourg just to celebrate your 85th birthday. So don't forget my invitation as usual. Okay? So it was a pleasure to have you, and you are welcome at any moment. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And bye.